In the dusty heart of the American West, a man's courage often danced on the edge of ridicule, but there were times when the laughter of the ignorant turned to awe. The sun hung low over the sprawling plains, casting long shadows that stretched like weary travelers across the rugged landscape. Here lived a man named Eli Granger, a rancher of no small repute, known for his unyielding principles and a reputation that echoed in the silence of his solitude. Once a lawman, Eli had traded his badge for the quiet life of cattle and horses, after a tragedy that haunted his every waking moment. His ranch, a solitary outpost surrounded by endless miles of scrub and rock, stood as both fortress and prison. The wind whispered secrets of the past, and the scent of dust and leather lingered in the air, reminding Eli of the life he had lost to the gunfire of fate. He preferred the company of cattle to people, for the creatures were honest and predictable, unlike the men who roamed the land, driven by greed and prejudice. But on this fateful day, as the golden rays of the sun melted into the horizon, casting an orange glow over the plains, Eli was drawn from his reverie by a commotion at the edge of his property. The sound of hoofbeats and frantic shouts pierced the stillness, echoing through the canyon. Eli's heart raced as he reached for his rifle, stepping out onto the porch, his eyes scanning the horizon. What he saw sent a chill down his spine. A group of Native Americans, battered and weary, were fleeing across the open land, pursued by men on horseback, men bearing the insignia of the local law. Eli's instincts kicked in, an age-old reflex honed from years of protecting the innocent. He knew these were not just strangers. They were people fleeing from a world that had turned against them, just as it had turned against him. Eli's fingers tightened around the rifle as the group of Native Americans stumbled closer, their eyes wide with fear, desperation painting their faces. Among them was a girl, no older than 16, her leg injured and dragging behind her. The sight of her pain twisted something deep within Eli. He felt the weight of the world pressing down on him, as if the land itself were demanding a choice, one that could cost him dearly. He could turn away, close his doors, and let the law do its work, just as most would have done. That would be the safe choice, the choice that spared him from confrontation and the potential wrath of those who saw no value in the lives of the native people. But in that instant, he thought of his own past, of the choices he had made that had led him to this lonely ranch, and the price he had paid for each decision. "Help us!" the girl cried out, her voice ragged with fear, the plea cutting through the tension like a knife. Eli's heart pounded in his chest as he wrestled with the decision. He knew what was at stake. To help them was to defy the law, to risk everything he had worked for, and to step into the very storm he had sought to escape. What would you do in Eli's shoes? Would you defend the innocent or protect your own skin? In that moment, Eli made his choice. With a deep breath, he lowered his rifle and stepped off the porch. "Get inside," he commanded, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. The Native Americans hesitated, their eyes darting between him and the approaching riders. "Now!" he barked, urgency lacing his tone. Without another word, the girl and her companions rushed into the sanctuary of his home, the door slamming behind them just as the riders came into view. Eli turned to face the approaching men, a dozen strong, their faces twisted with a cruel sense of righteousness. At their head rode Sheriff Caldwell, a man whose reputation for brutality was only matched by his self-serving nature. "Granger," Caldwell called out, a smug smile creeping across his face. "You're harboring fugitives. You know the law." "The law don't apply when it's a matter of life and death," Eli replied, his voice firm. He stood tall, the weight of his past and present colliding in that moment. "You want them? You'll have to go through me." The sheriff's laughter echoed in the stillness, a sound that chilled Eli's blood. "And what do you think you can do, old man? You think you can take on the law? You're just a washed-up lawman now, hiding behind your fence. You think they'll thank you for this? You think they'll care?" But Eli knew something Caldwell didn't. He had seen the strength of the oppressed and the power of unity among them. As he faced the sheriff, he was unaware that the shadows he had feared would soon transform into allies. The stakes were set, the die cast. He was no longer just a rancher or a recluse. He was a man standing for what was right, and the path ahead would lead to choices that could ignite a fire in the hearts of many. As the sheriff's men circled his ranch, Eli's mind raced, weighing the options before him. In the heart of the desolation, He felt a flicker of hope. He had saved a life today, but that was just the beginning of a fight that would change everything. Would those who looked upon him with scorn and disdain find the courage to bow before the truth, or would they remain shackled by their ignorance? Eli Granger stood ready to challenge the darkness, not just for himself, but for the innocent souls he had chosen to protect, and the winds of change were about to howl across the land. As Eli prepared for the confrontation, the air crackled with tension. He could hear the rustling of horses and the low murmurs of men, their voices thick with contempt creeping closer. The sheriff, a man whose arrogance was only matched by his greed, would not take kindly to Eli's defiance. The native girl whom Eli had rescued huddled against the wall of his barn, her wide eyes reflecting fear but also a flicker of trust. Her presence strengthened Eli's resolve. He was no longer just a man fighting against the tide. He was a symbol of hope for the oppressed. As the sheriff's men approached, Eli remembered the tales told around campfires, stories of warriors and their courage. He had always admired them, but never thought he would stand on the same ground, fighting for a cause that was not his own. Yet, here he was, feeling that same fire ignite within him. "Let's not make this a bloodbath, Eli," Caldwell's voice rang out, oily and thick with menace. "You think you can shelter those savages and walk away unscathed? You'll pay for this. Mark my words." Eli's heart raced. He took a deep breath and stepped outside, facing the gathering storm. "This ain't about savages, Caldwell. This is about humanity. You've stoked the flames of hatred long enough. It ends today." Laughter erupted from the sheriff's men, a cruel, mocking sound that echoed across the barren landscape. They were emboldened by their leader's presence, their eyes glinting with malice. But Eli stood his ground, his gaze steady. "You're the real savage here, Caldwell, exploiting fear to profit from bloodshed. You think these folks don't see the truth? You think they're blind to your corruption?" The laughter faltered, replaced by murmurs of uncertainty. A few men glanced at one another, their expressions wavering. Eli sensed a crack in their facade, a moment of vulnerability that could tip the scales. "What will it take for you to understand? You're not just waging war against them, you're waging war against your own humanity. You'll find that the very people you scorn have the strength to rise, and when they do, they won't bow to you, they'll rise against you." As Eli spoke, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows that danced around him. In the distance, he heard the distant thrum of drums, a sound that seemed to draw nearer with every heartbeat. It was an ominous promise of things to come, a reminder that Eli was not alone. Caldwell's face darkened as he took a step forward, his hand instinctively reaching for his weapon. "You're a fool, Eli. You think those people will rally behind you? You think they'll care when it comes down to their lives?" Eli opened his mouth to respond, but the sound of galloping hooves interrupted him. A cloud of dust rose on the horizon, and his heart surged. The drums grew louder, and with them came a wave of riders, their figures silhouetted against the fading light. Eli's breath caught in his throat as he recognized the banners they bore, the insignia of a tribe long thought to have retreated into the shadows of history. The native warriors were coming, drawn by the call of loyalty and courage, ready to stand beside him in defiance of tyranny. With resolve hardening within him, Eli turned back to Caldwell, his voice steady and unwavering. "You've underestimated us for the last time. You'll see what true strength looks like when we stand together." The sheriff's bravado faltered as the reality of the situation dawned upon him. Eli had ignited a fire, a beacon of unity that could not be snuffed out by mere threats. As the warriors rode forth, pride etched on their faces, Eli felt the weight of the world lift. The confrontation was no longer just about him. It was a testament to resilience and the indomitable spirit of those who had been silenced for too long. The time for reckoning was at hand, and Eli was ready to face whatever lay ahead. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows as the warriors dismounted, their eyes locked on Eli with a reverence that both thrilled and unnerved him. A hush fell over the gathering, the air charged with anticipation. Eli's heart raced as he took a step forward, the gravity of their trust settling heavily on his shoulders. "Eli," one of the warriors spoke, his voice deep and resonant, "your bravery has brought us here. We have seen the wrongs inflicted upon our people. We seek justice, and with your strength, we may reclaim what is ours." Eli nodded, words choking in his throat. He felt the enormity of their expectations, the weight of history clinging to the air like the dust on his boots. "I cannot fight this battle alone," he replied, his voice steady. "But together we can face Caldwell and his men. We must show them that we stand united, that we will not cower in fear." The elders stepped forward, their faces weathered but fierce, wisdom glinting in their eyes. "You have chosen a path of honor, Eli, but know this. The fight will not be easy. Caldwell is a cunning man, wrapped in the guise of authority. He will seek to divide us." Eli glanced back at the horizon, where the last rays of sunlight were swallowed by the shadows of the mountains. "Then we must prepare. We need a plan," he said, determination firing his resolve. "We will use his own game against him." As they strategized, the tension in the air transformed into a palpable energy. Eli's mind raced with possibilities, envisioning a way to expose Caldwell's corruption. They spoke of gathering evidence, rallying more allies, and revealing the truth of what lay behind the sheriff's smirking facade. But as the night deepened and the stars blinked into life, Eli felt an unsettling presence prickling at the back of his mind. His instincts screamed at him that Caldwell would not sit idly by while his power was challenged. The sheriff would retaliate, and the storm would be fierce. The next morning dawned with a vibrant orange glow that belied the darkness looming ahead. Eli and the warriors prepared for what would surely be a decisive confrontation. In the quiet moments before the storm, he wandered to the edge of his property, gazing out at the land that had witnessed both his triumphs and failures. Yet in that solitude, a familiar face emerged from the shadows. It was the girl he had saved, her spirit unbroken despite the chaos surrounding them. "Eli," she said softly, "I know you carry the weight of this fight, but remember, strength lies not just in might. It lies in our bonds, our shared stories." Her words resonated deep within him, filling the cracks of his hardened exterior. "We'll stand together no matter the cost," he promised, his voice fierce with conviction. As the sun climbed higher, Eli gathered the warriors and prepared to ride into town, their hearts steady with purpose. They had uncovered whispers of Caldwell's dealings, how he had exploited the land and its people for his gain. It was time to turn those whispers into a roar. But as they approached the town, Eli noticed something amiss. The streets lay too quiet, the townsfolk peering from behind closed doors. Fear hung thick in the air, a stark reminder of Caldwell's iron grip. Then the sound of hooves echoed in the distance. A cloud of dust billowed up, and Eli's heart sank as he recognized the figures riding towards them. Caldwell and his men, a ruthless smirk plastered across the sheriff's face. "Looks like you've gathered a pack of fools, Eli," Caldwell jeered, his voice carrying an edge of mockery. "You think you can challenge the law? You'll find out what happens to traitors in my town." Eli felt the stirrings of fear beneath his resolve, but pushed it aside. "We're not here to fight, Caldwell. We're here to expose the truth." And as the confrontation loomed, Eli recalled the girl's words, the bonds of their shared struggle strengthening his resolve. The stakes were high, but he was not alone. The warriors stood beside him, ready to face whatever storm Caldwell had summoned. In that moment, Eli understood that the power of truth could forge a weapon stronger than any gun. And as the dust settled around them, he steeled himself for the battle that would not just define him, but could change the course of their lives forever. Caldwell's men fanned out, their eyes cold and calculating, each one a reminder of the power he wielded. The sheriff's laughter echoed like thunder, bouncing off the barren hills that surrounded Eli's homestead. "You think you're some kind of hero, Eli, standing up for those savages?" Caldwell spat, his contempt seeping through every word. "You're a fool to put your neck on the line for them. I'll show you what happens when you defy me." Eli clenched his jaw, feeling the weight of the warriors behind him. They were not just shadows in his fight, they were flesh and blood, their stories woven into the very fabric of this land. "It's not about them being savages, it's about justice," Eli replied, his voice steady. "You're the one exploiting fear and hatred to fill your pockets. You'll have to do better than intimidation to silence me." Caldwell's eyes narrowed, realizing the gravity of Eli's words. "Justice? You think that's what you're serving? You're nothing but a coward hiding behind a false sense of righteousness. You don't know what it means to fight for your life. You've lived in your isolation too long. You're out here playing hero, but I know your past, Eli. I know what you lost." The sheriff's tone shifted, the mockery replaced by something darker. A flicker of doubt flashed through Eli as memories of his past clawed at his resolve. He had buried those ghosts deep, but Caldwell knew just how to stir them. Your tragedy makes you weak, Eli. You think they'll stand by you when it counts? They're just waiting for you to fall. Suddenly a voice broke through the tension, soft yet resolute, a voice that belonged to the girl Eli had saved. You're wrong, Sheriff. We stand together. You don't know our strength, nor do you understand the truth. Eli's heart raced as the girl stepped forward, flanked by her kin. It was in that moment, as Caldwell's smirk faltered, that Eli felt the shift in power. You think you can intimidate us with words, Caldwell? Your lies run deeper than the dust in these plains, but the truth runs deeper still. Caldwell's bravado cracked, and in that moment, Eli could see the fear lurking beneath the sheriff's facade. What truth? These people are nothing without a white man's guidance. They're lost without me, Caldwell yelled, desperation creeping into his voice. The air was thick with tension, and Eli sensed the turning tide. Is that why you've been peddling fear to the townsfolk? Because you're scared they'll find out who you really are? Eli challenged, locking eyes with Caldwell. A flicker of recognition swept across the girl's face as she whispered something to Eli, her words like a lightning bolt illuminating the dark. He's not just a corrupt sheriff. He's been stealing land, Eli. Land that belongs to our people. The ground beneath them shifted as the truth emerged. Caldwell was not merely a lawman gone rogue. He was a man driven by greed, a serpent in the grass, preying on the vulnerable. Your crimes will come to light, Caldwell. We'll show the townsfolk who you really are, Eli declared, his voice rising above the noise of uncertainty. As Caldwell's face twisted in rage, Eli realized they had the upper hand. They had the truth, and with it, they could unravel the web of deceit. But Caldwell, cornered and desperate, would not back down without a fight. You think this is over? You'll regret this day, Eli. I won't let you take what's mine. With those words, the sheriff turned, his men following, but the threat lingered like a dark cloud over the horizon. Eli stood tall, fueled by the strength of the warriors behind him, knowing the battle was far from over. The path ahead was fraught with peril, but Eli had something he never thought he'd find again, a purpose. And as the dust settled around them once more, he understood that the fight for truth was just beginning. Eli's resolve hardened as he watched Caldwell retreat, knowing that a storm was brewing. The warriors gathered around him, their eyes shining with a mix of respect and determination. They were prepared to stand by him, but he could sense the weight of their history pressing upon them like the heat of the midday sun. Eli, a voice broke through the murmur of the group. It was the young girl he had saved, her small frame standing resolutely among the warriors. You are not alone. We will fight for what is ours, for our land and our people. You have shown us honor. Her words resonated deeply within him, igniting a fire he thought long extinguished. But the path they chose would not be easy. The town of Crestview was not known for its acceptance, and Caldwell's influence loomed large. Eli knew he had to rally the townsfolk, to open their eyes to the truth that lay hidden beneath Caldwell's lies. Yet as the sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows over the rugged terrain, Eli felt the cold hand of doubt grip his heart. Could he convince a community steeped in prejudice to stand against a man who had held power for far too long? That evening, he gathered the warriors around a flickering fire. Tomorrow, we will face the town, he said, his voice steady. But we must prepare. We need allies among the townsfolk, those willing to see beyond color and creed. The air crackled with tension as they strategized, plans unfolding like the stars above them. Eli's mind raced with the possibilities. He thought of old friends, neighbors who once shared laughter over whiskey and cards. Could he reach them? In the dark, a figure approached, shrouded in shadow. It was a man from the town, a former soldier named Jake, who had fought alongside Eli in another life. I heard you had trouble, Eli, he said, his voice low. Caldwell's not a man to be trifled with. He's got the law wrapped around his finger. Eli's heart quickened. Then help us, Jake. We need voices that matter, men who can sway the town's decision. Caldwell's grip can be broken, but we can't do it alone. Jake hesitated, the conflict clear in his eyes. You know what they'll say. They'll call you a traitor. They'll call me one too. Then let them, Eli replied, passion igniting his words. A man's worth isn't measured by the color of his skin or his past sins. It's measured by his actions, and we have the chance to do something right here. As the fire crackled, a silence fell over the group. In that stillness, something shifted. The warriors nodded in agreement, their determination palpable. They were ready to fight, not just for land, but for their dignity, for their future. But Eli knew the clock was ticking. Caldwell would not take his threats lightly. As the embers glowed brighter, a plan began to form, one that could turn the tide in their favor. They needed to gather proof of Caldwell's corruption, to expose the man behind the badge. With dawn's first light, they set out, a ragtag band fueled by hope and desperation. They would confront the townsfolk, armed with truth, and reveal the poison that had seeped into their community. But Eli could feel the weight of the challenge ahead. As they approached the town square, the chatter of the early morning crowd filled the air. He spotted familiar faces among the throng, men and women who had once called him friend. But there, too, was Caldwell, his presence a dark shadow looming over their plans. Eli took a deep breath, steeling himself for the confrontation to come. This was not just a fight for justice. This was a fight for their lives, for their right to exist on the land that was rightfully theirs. The battle for truth was upon them, and Eli was ready to face it head-on, knowing that the fate of many rested on his shoulders. Eli stepped forward, his heart pounding like the hooves of a runaway horse. The townsfolk's chatter faded as he raised his voice, steady and unyielding. "Folks, gather round. We need to talk about Caldwell and the corruption that's tearing this place apart." A mix of surprise and skepticism washed over the crowd. Whispers rippled like wind through dry grass. Eli's eyes scanned the familiar faces, searching for signs of support. He knew some still viewed him as an outsider, a man who had chosen silence over the camaraderie of their small community. But today, he was no longer that man. Caldwell stepped forward, a smirk curling his lips, his eyes glinting with malice. "And what do you have to say, Eli? Still pretending to be the hero?" "No one wants to hear your nonsense," he jeered, a dagger in his voice. But Eli pressed on, feeling the weight of his allies at his back. "I'm not the hero, Caldwell. I'm just a man who knows the truth. You've been lying, stirring hatred, and profiting from the pain of others. It ends today." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, hesitant but growing. Eli continued, "You've convinced folks that the native people are the enemy, but who's really to blame? Look at how you've manipulated us, pitting neighbor against neighbor for your gain." Caldwell's face twisted in anger, but Eli could see cracks forming in the facade of his power. He gestured to the small group of Native Americans standing resolutely behind him. "These people, they're not the threat. They're our brothers and sisters, and they deserve our respect and protection." A voice from the crowd emerged, shaky but firm. "He's right. We've listened to lies for too long." Eli seized the moment, his voice rising above the din. "We have proof. We've uncovered your dealings, Caldwell. The land grants, the stolen property. We know how you've colluded with the railroads to push these folks out. It's all coming to light." Caldwell's bravado faltered, the smirk fading as he realized the tide was turning. "You think you can just stand there and slander my name? You'll regret this." But Eli stood firm, a quiet fire in his eyes. "No, Caldwell, you'll regret underestimating the strength of a united community. You've preyed on our fears, but we won't let you divide us anymore." With each word, Eli felt the warmth of hope rising, and the crowd began to rally. Old friendships rekindled, and allies emerged from the shadows of doubt. Faces once familiar now joined in solidarity, and Eli's heart swelled with determination. As the crowd grew bolder, he felt the unmistakable presence of the Native Americans behind him, their resilience becoming a powerful force against the corruption that had plagued their lives for too long. And as they stood together, Eli knew this was only the beginning. Caldwell, sensing his grip slipping, turned on his heel, his anger boiling over. "You'll all regret this, I'll make sure of it." But Eli didn't flinch. "Let him come, folks. We stand for what is right. We'll show him that the truth cannot be silenced." Eli felt the palpable energy of the crowd, the fierce resolve in their eyes igniting a fire that even Caldwell's threats could not extinguish. He knew the confrontation was only the precursor to a greater battle, one that would lead them to uncover the deeper conspiracy at play. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows over the town square, but Eli felt the dawn of change rising within him. Today, they would stand together, and tomorrow they would reclaim their story. The winds of the west were shifting, and with them came a chance for redemption. As the crowd surged forward, Eli stepped into the center, the weight of history and hope pressing upon him. "Listen here, folks. We've been told lies for too long. The truth is buried under greed and hatred, but together, we can dig it up." With steady hands, he unfurled the documents he had gathered, revealing Caldwell's corrupt dealings, bribes, threats, and plots against the very people he sought to exploit. Gasps spread through the crowd like wildfire, eyes widening in disbelief as the extent of the treachery came to light. Eli continued, "This man has betrayed us all. He's not a lawman. He's a leech, sucking the life out of our town. But we are stronger than his corruption, stronger than his threats. We have each other and we have the truth." The whispers grew louder, conviction taking root in the hearts of those gathered. Behind him, the Native Americans stood tall, their faces reflecting the strength of their ancestors. One stepped forward, speaking with a voice that resonated through the gathering. "We are not here to take what isn't ours. We are here to reclaim our dignity, our land, and our future." As the crowd rallied, Eli felt the tide turning. Caldwell, once a figure of fear, now appeared cornered, his bravado faltering in the face of unity and resolve. "You think you can defeat me? I control everything here," he spat, desperation creeping into his tone. "No," Eli replied, his voice steady. "You control nothing. The truth will shine brighter than your lies." The crowd erupted in chants, the air thick with determination, drowning out Caldwell's threats. In that moment, Eli knew the struggle was not just about righting wrongs. It was about forging a new identity, one built on respect, equality, and a shared future. With the final pieces of evidence in hand, Eli turned to the townsfolk. "We will take this to the authorities. We will demand justice not just for ourselves, but for every soul who has suffered under his rule." Caldwell's face twisted in anger, but he was now surrounded by those who had once feared him. A man of power reduced to a coward, exposed by the very people he sought to subjugate. As the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting a golden hue over the town, Eli felt a profound shift within himself and among his neighbors. The journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, but they would face it together. Justice isn't always swift, Eli reflected, and mercy isn't a weakness. It takes courage to stand for what is right, to extend a hand where others would pull away. But this is our home, our story, and together we will write a new chapter. And as the first stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, a sense of hope settled over the land. The winds of the west had shifted, carrying with them the promise of a better tomorrow, born from the courage and compassion that had risen in the face of darkness. What would you do when the truth is laid bare before you? Would you stand for justice or turn away in fear?